Hello.
After a brief pause, my daughter Emma answered the phone. She sounded oddly nervous, and I couldn't help but ask, "Emma?" "It's Mom." "Where are you right now?"
Who is this? Mom is right next to me.
I thought Emma might be playing a prank. She wasn't the type to do such things, but kids grow up quickly. Perhaps she had picked up some mischievous behavior without my knowledge. "Emma, what's going on? Pranks like this aren't okay."
It's not a prank. Mom is here next to me. My mom, she's gone.
"Then who is this a mom?"
Mom is my new mom.
With those words, everything became clear. My name is Natalia. I'm currently a freelance writer. I married my husband, Miles, 7 years ago. 2 years later, we welcomed our daughter, Emma. Emma is incredibly adorable, and Miles and I have poured endless love into her. Despite our occasional arguments, it's safe to say that Emma has held our marriage together. I believe we'll continue living together until Emma grows up, even if it means arguing along the way. Mom, how are you feeling?
Don't worry, I'm fine. Just a little tired.
But there was one thing weighing on my mind, my mother back home. My father passed away a few years ago, leaving my mother living alone. She always respected my father, standing quietly behind him with a gentle smile. She left an impression of strength. However, after my father's death, my mother's health began to decline. I constantly worried about her. If only I could visit home more often, but it's quite far from where we live. Whenever possible, Emma and I went home to my parents' house, and when it wasn't, I checked in with her over the phone. Since I'll likely be able to come home this week, if there's anything you need, please let me know.
You don't have to worry so much about me.
As my mother said this while smiling, she seemed quite frail, and an unpleasant premonition lingered in my mind. Unfortunately, that premonition turned out to be true, and soon my mother spent even more time lying in bed. Around that time, it became difficult to visit home in sync with Emma's nursery schedule. I started making solo trips back home, leaving Emma in Miles' care. Sorry to bother you, but can I ask a favor? Despite feeling apologetic, I asked Miles in that manner. However, he always responded with a disapproving expression.
I work at the office every day, and I'm exhausted.
Yes, I understand. But I'm worried about my mother.
Just because you're worried about your mother, does that mean you can neglect your duties as a wife?
It's not like that. Miles sighed conspicuously. While I understood Miles' perspective, I couldn't help but think that since we were family, we should support each other. After all, I wasn't a stay-at-home mom. I worked as a writer and sometimes had to travel for assignments. It wasn't just Miles who faced challenges. But then, something unexpected happened with Miles.
Leave Emma to me.
Huh?
I've been thinking. You're working so hard. Besides, taking Emma with you every time you visit your parents' home must tire her out.
Well, yes.
And since you're a freelancer, you have more flexibility alone. It's more practical for me to take care of Emma.
That makes sense. For some reason, Miles enthusiastically volunteered to look after Emma. I was taken aback by his sudden change. I wondered if I could truly entrust Emma to him. But Miles had always adored Emma, And at that time, my mother's health was deteriorating significantly. So, I decided to leave Emma in his care until my mother's condition improved a bit. In hindsight, that decision was a mistake. Now, all I feel is regret. After that, I became extremely busy, spending more time on work-related trips and at my parents' house than at home. The act of carrying my laptop while visiting my mother was quite burdensome, but thanks to Miles taking care of Emma, it became much easier. However, during that time, something seemed off with Emma. Emma, what were you doing today?
I was out with Dad.
Since Miles started looking after Emma, she began acting strangely distant toward me. When I asked her anything, she avoided eye contact and nervously answered. I wondered if Miles had influenced her somehow, but when I asked Emma, she simply replied, "It's nothing." Even when I tried to confront Miles, he just got angry and said, "There's nothing going on." Juggling caregiving and work, I couldn't dedicate much time to this issue. Besides, Miles seemed oddly intent on keeping Emma away from me. Something must be going on, I thought, but I couldn't take action. Then, one day, I received a sudden call. My mother had collapsed. It was a stroke. Ironically, it happened the day after I returned home from visiting my mother. I rushed back to her house. Fortunately, someone saw my mother collapse in a public place, and she was quickly taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, the damage was severe, and she passed away. I stayed at my parents' house, handling various arrangements. My mother lay on the bed, seemingly asleep, and it was hard to grasp that she would never wake up. But the reality was that she was gone, and time moved forward regardless of my feelings. When everything was prepared, I contacted Miles to attend the funeral.
Can I skip it?
What?
I have an important job the next day.
It's a family funeral. Can't you take a day off if you explain the reason?
She wasn't my parent.
Why would you say that?
You're so annoying. Fine, I'll go on the day of the funeral.
After Miles hung up, I sat there, a mix of anger and disbelief. Even with a busy job, isn't it natural to be there for family during times of sorrow? Miles had hesitated even about attending the funeral. Naturally, Miles didn't help with the preparations. Instead, my aunt and her daughter and her husband volunteered to assist on the day of the funeral. There were many things I didn't understand, and I would have been lost on my own. Thanks to them, I managed to complete all the arrangements, but I felt utterly exhausted. I'm incredibly grateful to my aunt's daughter and her husband, even though they were practically strangers. As for Miles, he arrived just in the nick of time for the funeral and left immediately afterward. Whenever relatives asked about him, I'd vaguely smile and say, "He's a busy person." After the funeral, I planned to return home right away. I felt I needed to resolve things with Miles. However, there were numerous tasks related to my mother's inheritance and changing the property title. Ultimately, I couldn't return home for several days. When I finally got back home, I couldn't believe my eyes. What? My house, which I hadn't visited in a while, felt eerily empty. It seemed like no one had been there for quite some time. I checked inside, and to my surprise, all of Miles' belongings and household items were gone. What is going on? I searched every room. Emma's belongings were also missing. Panicking, I contacted Emma. I had given Emma a child-friendly smartphone. I had reservations about letting a 5-year-old have a phone, but as a freelance writer, I occasionally traveled for interviews. Miles also worked, leaving Emma alone at times. Having a means of communication was essential in case of emergencies. So, Emma had her own smartphone.
Hello.
After a few rings, Emma answered the phone. She sounded oddly nervous, and I couldn't help but ask, "Emma?" "It's Mom." "Where are you right now?"
Who is this? Mom is right next to me.
Huh? I thought Emma might be playing a prank. She wasn't the type to do such things, but kids grow up quickly. Perhaps she had picked up some mischievous behavior without my knowledge. "Emma, what's wrong? Pranks like this aren't okay."
It's not a prank. Mom is right next to me. My mom, she's gone.
In Emma's tearful voice, I suddenly realized that something unimaginable might be happening. For now, I needed to calm Emma down and find out about Miles. Emma, it's okay. Can you tell me calmly? How is Dad doing?
Dad is at work. He's working for Mom and me.
Then who is this a mom?
Mom is my new mom.
With those words, everything became clear. Miles suddenly taking care of Emma was all connected to this. And I could speculate that Miles had influenced Emma and taken her away. I focused on dispelling Emma's misunderstanding. Fortunately, Emma didn't fully believe what Miles had told her, and she listened to my words sincerely. Her distant behavior during the call was because Miles had deleted my contact information from her phone. I was furious at Miles for such cruel actions.
Are you truly my mom?
Yes. Don't worry. Please wait. I'll come get you.
Yes.
After ending the call with Emma, I immediately dialed Miles. He didn't answer right away, likely busy with work, but I persisted. Eventually, he picked up.
What? I'm working right now.
Hey. What did you do?
You're so annoying.
Where are you right now?
Oh, so you finally noticed. You've been busy taking care of your mother's house since you've been completely absorbed in your mother affairs.
But it was my mother's funeral. You never helped, and...
There's a limit to everything. Besides, your mother wasn't my parent, so I don't owe her any assistance.
Miles continued with a sigh.
You don't do any housework or cooking, and Emma is entirely my responsibility. You're not a good wife.
What are you saying?
I'm preparing for a divorce. I plan to find a better wife than you and remarry. I've decided to sell the house too, so get rid of your stuff.
I was left speechless. Certainly, I may have neglected some household chores and childcare due to caring for my mother. But isn't that understandable? Besides, it's not like I did nothing. When I was at home, I tried to handle household tasks as much as possible for Emma and Miles, all while juggling my work as a writer and looking after my mother. Miles' words were incredibly harsh considering all this. And on top of that, he referred to my mother as a stranger. His behavior was beyond unacceptable, and I resolved firmly to break up with Miles. After ending the call, I immediately started preparing for the divorce. Miles seemed to imply that it was my fault we were divorcing, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I had valid reasons for being away from home. Moreover, Miles hadn't contributed significantly to my mother's funeral, and if his recent words were any indication, he had been unfaithful during the time I was at my parents' house. Clearly, he was in the wrong. Additionally, Miles mentioned his intention to sell our home. Yet, this house was in my name. We had purchased it using the inheritance I received when my father passed away. At the time, I was pregnant and considering moving to a family-friendly apartment. So, I used the lump sum to buy the apartment outright. Even though we were married, the inherited assets were mine alone. Originally, I hadn't planned on divorce, so I didn't see any issues. But now the situation had changed. Upon investigation, I discovered that all the real estate documents that should have been at home were missing. Unbelievably, Miles had taken them and used our home as collateral. This was undoubtedly criminal behavior. I hired a private investigator. The facts gradually came to light. While I was caring for my mother at my parents' house, Miles had been cheating all along. And he had done so with Emma in tow. It appeared that Miles had convinced Emma that Mom had abandoned Emma and manipulated her into accepting the affair partner as her new mother. Furthermore, Miles had lied to the affair partner, claiming to be a single father raising Emma, all while planning to remarry using Emma as leverage. To make matters worse, he intended to use the money from selling our home to build a new one with the affair partner. Miles' actions were beyond reprehensible, and I felt nauseated by them. First and foremost, I had to reclaim Emma. With that determination, I immediately took action. I consulted a lawyer and filed for a court case. During the trial, Miles was quite reluctant to relinquish custody of Emma to me.
I have more financial stability.
Well, I earn enough to provide for Emma comfortably. Our discussions reached an impasse. However, Emma's words became the decisive factor.
I want to live with Mom.
Respecting Emma's wishes, I gained custody, and we proceeded with the divorce. At that time, I decided to claim compensation for the affair-related emotional distress and child support.
Wait a minute! What does this mean?
By initiating the legal proceedings, Miles was exposed for not having divorced as he claimed. Consequently, the affair partner also accused him of fraud and demanded compensation. As a result, Miles now struggles financially due to payments for emotional distress to me and child support, as well as compensation to the affair partner. Currently, he supplements his income from his main job with late-night part-time work, barely making ends meet. It's entirely his own doing. On the other hand, Emma and I moved to a location near elementary and middle schools, close to the train station. I considered Emma's growth process in our decision. Fortunately, besides the compensation and child support, I have my mother's inheritance and earnings from my writing. I won't face any difficulties until Emma reaches adulthood. I regret trusting Miles and allowing Emma to experience such unpleasant memories. Moving forward, I hope we can create happy moments together.
How did you like this story? If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to my channel. See you in the next video.
You will give your father's inheritance to my mother as a gift.
When I explained to my husband Aaron that my father had passed away, he said that
You are being taken care of by my mother, right? Who do you think taught you how to do household chores? Don't you have any gratitude? If you oppose this, we'll get divorced.
I had reached my limit. I had never been taught how to do household chores. I was just being exploited. Why did I have to be grateful for that? And I didn't want to live with this man who was just using me and didn't love me. Okay. Let's break up. I said that and left his parents' house. I am Gianna, 28 years old. My father ran a company and I grew up in a wealthy family. I had a comfortable life, but I had one complex. It was that I had never dated a man until I became a college student. I went to girls' schools in middle and high school, so I had no contact with men. That's why I was struggling with the distance between me and men when I became a college student. That's when I met Aaron. He was my senior at my part-time job, and he always covered for me and encouraged me when I made mistakes. He was reliable and smart. I think I fell for him first. My friends pushed me and I confessed to him and he said yes, and I was so happy that I couldn't sleep that night. It was the first time I had a boyfriend, and I was overjoyed to have an older boyfriend. Aaron was really smart on dates and I had a lot of fun with him. 6 months after we started dating, Aaron got a job.
I got a job at N Corporation. So,
What? Really? That's my dad's company.
ha! Your dad? Really?
I hadn't told Aaron that my father was the president of the company. I wanted him to see me as myself, not as the president's daughter. He was shocked to find out that my father was the president of the company he worked for. A few days later, he suddenly proposed to me. I was so confused by the surprise that he gently handed me a bouquet of roses.
I'll make you happy forever.
It was like a dream. Of course, I said yes. I introduced him to my parents right away. They looked worried that I was still a student and getting married, but I somehow convinced them and forced the marriage. I'll definitely graduate from college and I won't cause any trouble for you, Dad and Mom. I said that and left the house. Aaron was from a single mother's family and he had no one but her. But when I met her, she was really kind and looked just like Aaron. He was gentle, but also manly and led me. I was sure that marrying Aaron would make me happy. That's what I thought at the time. After we got married, Aaron had no money because he had just started working. I was also working part-time, but it was hard to afford the rent and other expenses, so we started living with his parents. That was the beginning of the nightmare. The first morning of living together, I woke up to a sudden shake of my body.
Hey! What time do you think it is?
Huh? I looked at the clock and it was 5 a.m. I was planning to get up at 6 and prepare the breakfast, so I was shocked and jumped out of bed.
How long are you going to sleep?
Until 6.
What are you talking about? You're a wife, so you have to get up at 4 and clean the house.
4 o'clock?
Of course. What are you saying, you spoiled brat? You have to follow our rules since you came to our house.
I woke up to her yelling and got out of bed quickly. I had never gotten up so early before. My mom did the chores for me, but she didn't get up that early either. I thought other families were like that too. I was surprised that Aaron's family got up so early and hurried to the kitchen.
You're late today, so hurry up and prepare the meal. You have to make soup and at least 2 side dishes every day. You got that?
Oh, yes. I replied without understanding. And I managed to cook everything by 6:30, but from then on, I had to spend every day doing chores. When I came home from college, my mother-in-law was standing in the doorway.
Hey, you didn't clean at all today. What were you doing?
I'm sorry. I had a college assignment.
I don't care about that. You're a wife, so you should prioritize housework. You're so ignorant of the world.
Her words pierced my heart. I was trying my best. I got up at 4 every day and cleaned and did laundry all over the house, and prepared breakfast. I went to college, and after I got home, I went shopping and prepared dinner. I took in the laundry and washed the bath. I had no time for myself. All my college friends were having fun, but only me. I felt like giving up, and I talked to Aaron when he came home. I thought he would be on my side, but he said something I never expected.
What? Mom is strict because you can't do housework.
What?
You don't know how ordinary people live, do you? You're lucky. You've lived without doing any housework, right? I envy you.
He laughed mockingly and I lost my words. I had been doing housework since I got married. But he didn't appreciate any of my efforts. He didn't do anything himself, and he just drank until late every night. I got more and more dissatisfied. But I didn't want to go back to my parents' house easily, because I had married him against their wishes and left the house. I desperately balanced college and housework. I had no sleep, and I took naps between classes. My friends were worried about the dark circles under my eyes that were getting darker every day. I was at my limit mentally and physically when I was close to graduation. But I managed to graduate from college. I graduated from an art college, so I became a freelance illustrator after I got married. I had some spare time during the day, so I could rest, but I was still much more exhausted than before I got married. And as I got thinner, Aaron stopped coming home. Every day, he came home late at night with the smell of women's perfume. I was shocked at first, but somewhere in my heart I thought I knew it. I asked him to help me with the housework on his days off, but he said housework was women's work and wouldn't listen. We fought every time we saw each other. For several years, I had been living a leisurely and aimless life. Then one day, I received a phone call from my mother.
Your father has terminal cancer. The treatment options are limited, and he has only 3 months left.
No way! Desperate, I rushed to the hospital where I saw my father looking even more worn out than the last time I'd seen him. Since getting married, I hadn't visited home much, so I had no idea he was deteriorating like this. And then, true to the doctor's prognosis, my father passed away within those 3 months. I was grateful to have been there to say my final goodbye, but the sudden loss left me in tears. Back home, I explained everything to Aaron. My father passed away earlier. His funeral is this weekend.
I see. How much inheritance does your father have?
Huh? Suddenly, Aaron brought up the topic of inheritance, leaving me dumbfounded. He wore an expression as if discussing the weather.
Your father's inheritance. Your mother probably didn't earn much, and most of it belongs to the company, right? So, practically, you'll inherit most of your father's assets.
And?
The inheritance you receive, give it as a gift to my mother.
What are you saying? I raised my voice in shock, and Aaron frowned.
You've been dependent on my mother, haven't you? Who do you think taught you household chores? Don't you feel any gratitude? If you go against this, we'll get a divorce.
Divorce?
Exactly. Well, you're useless anyway. You thought you'd become the next CEO, but they've already chosen someone else. Apparently, a new CEO is coming from overseas.
Wait, did you marry me just to vie for the CEO position?
Of course. You're worth nothing else. You won't even take money from your parents without hesitation. Useless, that's what you are.
I'd had enough. I'd never received any help with household chores. I'd been nothing more than a servant. And now, I didn't want to live with this man who used me without any love for me. Understood. Let's part ways.
Huh?
I'll send the divorce papers through a lawyer, I declared.
Wait. Are you sure? You call yourself an illustrator or whatever, but you don't earn much. Aren't you embarrassed to return to your parents' home with so little?
I'd rather face their anger and ridicule than continue living in this house. Goodbye. Leaving a stunned Aaron behind, I stormed out of the house. 1 month later, I got a phone call from Aaron.
Hey! What do you mean by this? What is compensation?
He yelled at me in a loud voice and I sighed. What do you mean? You were cheating on me, weren't you?
That's not true. There's no proof.
There is proof. I hired a detective agency to investigate your affair. You lied about going on business trips and going on vacations with your lover many times, didn't you?
That's...
Aaron's voice became small and he stuttered. I had asked the detective agency to investigate him when he started coming home with women's perfume on him. They found out that he was dating a specific woman frequently. And he had been with her since before we got married, so he was just using me. I decided to demand a high amount of compensation for his affair. There was evidence from the detective agency, such as photos, so he couldn't deny it. It's not wrong to ask for compensation when you were cheated on, right?
But I can't pay it now. Please, just forget about it.
I can't do that.
Don't say that. I really can't pay it now.
He said impatiently. He must be desperate. I knew why he was so desperate to say he couldn't pay. That's because you can't pay, right? You lost your job, didn't you?
How do you know that?
Because my brother fired you.
Your brother.
Yes, the new president is my brother. He graduated from a university overseas and worked for a Singapore company, but he came back to America when he found out about my father's illness. I heard Aaron gasp.
Then, please help me. I'm looking for a new job, but I can't find one. Please.
I was disgusted by Aaron, who only said what was convenient for him. Did he think I could change the personnel if I asked? I had nothing to do with the management, even if we were family. And even if he asked me, I wouldn't ask my brother to let him work again. That's because there was a reason why Aaron was fired. I can't be with a criminal.
You're calling me a criminal? How dare you?
You were fired for embezzlement, weren't you?
How do you know that?
Because I told my brother everything. I was suspicious of where you got the money to stay at nice hotels every time, based on the results of the investigation. I just said you should check the expenses. As soon as my brother came back to America, I told him about the divorce and Aaron. He felt something was off when he saw the results of the investigation. He suggested that I should check the expenses, and he immediately committed to look into it. The investigation revealed that Aaron had repeatedly claimed the travel, accommodation, and food expenses with his lover as company expenses. The total amount was over $10,000. And Aaron was fired from the company for embezzling company funds. Not only that, but he was also asked to repay the entire amount of the embezzled expenses. It must be hard to pay back over $10,000 and the compensation, now that he has lost his job and income. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let the compensation for the affair go.
Please, can't we get back together? I don't have a job or a life right now. My mother still has a few years until she gets her pension.
Are you trying to use me again?
I would never do such a thing.
I laughed at Aaron's words. Didn't you say it yourself? You married me because my father was the president, but if you can't become the next president, you don't need me. Well, too bad, but you're useless to me too, since you have no job or income.
Don't say that. Being an illustrator is hard work, right? It's better to live together.
I'm sorry, but my work is going well. I had a big request and I made about $4,000 last month. So I can live without you.
No way.
Besides, I'm living at my parents' house now, and the living expenses are much lower. There's no benefit to getting back with Aaron, and I don't want to either. If you're having such a hard time, why don't you ask your lover for help? As I said that, Aaron let out a cry of agony.
She left me as soon as I lost my job. She said she didn't need a guy with no money. She was a heartless woman.
I had nothing but contempt for Aaron, who screamed like a tragic heroine, even though he had said similar things to me.
You're the only one I have. Please. Come back to me. Mom is apologizing too.
I absolutely hate it.
Don't say that. I realized that you were the only one I loved.
But you seem to think of me as nothing but the president's daughter.
That's not true. I love you. So let's start over again.
I was no longer moved by Aaron's words. I had already lost interest in Aaron. I refuse. Goodbye. I said that and hung up the phone. I felt like he was screaming something, but I ignored it all. And I quickly blocked his number. I never wanted to have anything to do with Aaron and his mother again. After that, Aaron apparently couldn't pay back the embezzled expenses and the compensation and went into debt. He had no job, and he couldn't borrow money from a decent financial institution, so he borrowed money from a shady place and now he's in trouble with the interest. And because the embezzlement became known in the industry, his job hunting failed miserably. The other day, I saw him working part-time at a supermarket. He was living a hard life, paying back his debt and compensation, but it was none of my business. I could only be disgusted by his own actions. I think he should live with the guilt of his crimes from now on. And I gradually became famous as an illustrator, and I was grateful to receive a lot of work. While working on designs for goods and other things, I had a wonderful encounter and started dating a new guy. We live together and he's a kind man who helps me with the chores. I failed at marriage once, but I'm still in my 20s. I still have time, and I can start over. I used to do nothing but housework like a slave and had no time for myself. That's why I swore to myself that from now on, I would live while cherishing myself.
How did you like this story? Please also subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.